Hello, everyone, and welcome to another VES-Artex Academy webinar. Thank you for joining us on this lovely Friday. Today we are joined by Dr. Don Niles of Pagel's Family Businesses, and we're really looking forward to his presentation. Before Dr. Niles goes ahead and gets started, just one housekeeping item. We will be taking questions throughout the presentation. You can type them into the Q&A box on the panel on the bottom of your screen, and we will address them at the end of the presentation. And with that, Dr. Niles, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Annie, for the invitation to speak on your webinar today. And thanks to anybody that's tuning in to hear what we have to talk about here in Northeast Wisconsin. It's a great pleasure to have a chance to interact with other people in the dairy industry of all types, producers and professionals and other support community. We're all in this business and this with our energy together, and sometimes we don't look over our shoulder at the people that aren't participating with us in agriculture. So I'd like to talk today a little bit about what we've seen up here in Kewaunee County and what I've seen personally for changes in our industry. I have the background of not having been raised in agriculture. I was raised in the suburbs of southeast Wisconsin, and I didn't know what kind of cows black and white ones were until I asked somebody when I was 18 years old. So I'm new to agriculture, but I got my start as a dairy veterinarian. And then after that, switched over to becoming a partner on a dairy with one of my clients, so a dairy producer since 2001. I loved all the different jobs and opportunities I've had in the dairy industry. And one of the main reasons are the people that I get to interact with. So I'm looking forward to sharing with you some of our thoughts and observations today. Today, the title is Taking Ownership of Our Own Dairy Story. And I think that's crucial, and yet I don't know that it was even a phrase that would have been considered maybe just a couple decades ago. A couple decades ago, it was pretty simple. We were producing food for people, and people were consuming food, and they were glad that we were doing it. It all seemed pretty simple back then, but things have changed, and society has changed, and agriculture has changed. So I'd like to talk today about what some of those changes have meant to us in Northeast Wisconsin, and what course we've taken to remain viable and welcome in our area. We'll be talking about Peninsula Pride Farms, and that's an organization that we started, but I'd like to go back a little further and tell you where we came from, why we came about, and then talk about what we've been doing. But basically, we're in response to a dairy industry that was under at least increased environmental and social scrutiny. People that had no part in farming could read anything and everything about agriculture. They might not have had direct contact with agriculture themselves, but they certainly had strong opinions as to what they felt was being done and what should be done. So that's basically the background of what we'll be discussing today. For those of you that aren't familiar with the map of Wisconsin, we are in Kewaunee County. Kewaunee is in the Door County Peninsula, at the base of the Door County Peninsula. And we've got the recognition of being the largest concentration of dairy cows in a county, not only in Wisconsin, but in east of the Rocky Mountains. A lot of dairy cows here. Our area was settled by German and Belgian immigrants that came over from Europe. And because, as you can see, our county is in a peninsula, we get cool breezes coming off not only Lake Michigan to the east, but also the Bay of Green Bay to the west. It's wonderfully cooled area for dairy cows, which you know is very important, even with natural ventilation. And there's also a great area of flat ground and good soil for alfalfa growing. So when those immigrants came over with their 1 or 2 cows, this was the place they wanted to be to start their dairy farms. So Kewaunee County has long been a very strong dairy community. If we look in terms of overall USA top dairy counties, we can see here on this slide that the counties with the most cows per square mile are out west in Idaho, California. But if you get here to the Midwest, there's only 2 counties east of the Rocky Mountains that have more than 100 cows per square mile. That would be Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and Kewaunee, Wisconsin. So we have counties in Wisconsin that have more cows than Kewaunee County, but they're much larger counties. So if we look at cows per square mile, or the density, or the impact of the farms on the surrounding community, Kewaunee is very strong dairy, and is certainly up there in the leading counties as far as cows per square mile. We've always been proud in the Wisconsin dairy industry of being welcome in Wisconsin, being a major factor in Wisconsin's economy. Wisconsin has a relatively small economy compared to some states like New York and California. So dairy is not only big here, but it's almost uniquely big for the state overall. You can also see, and this is no surprise to anybody, that the cows and the herd numbers have been going steadily down since the mid 1900s. And if you look at in terms of cows, there's been a decrease from a little over 20,000 to getting down closer to 10. And if you look at the number of herds, there's been a huge drop of almost 90% of the farms having left. So the cows were still here to some degree, although reduced, but the farms themselves were drastically reduced in number. In Kewaunee County, however, we had a little different trend. If you can see that the cows went from 30,000 cows and stayed very steady from about 75 till the mid 1990s rather, and then had a little drop, which reflected the rest of the country. But since that time, since the mid 90s, has actually rebounded, and the number of the cows in Kewaunee County have increased very substantially since 1995. Along with that, the production per cow has changed, just like it has throughout most of the U.S., going from about 10,000 pounds per cow to 25,000 pounds per cow on average. So Kewaunee is typical in that the cows are producing more per cow, but unusual in that there's actually more cows than there used to be, which is not the typical trend in Wisconsin. So what is the reason for the increased production? This is nothing new to any producer or ag professional on the presentation here. Unlike what people not involved in agriculture could think, it's nothing unusual or draconian or overly demanding that we're doing with our cows. It's just that we've simply learned how to make cows more comfortable. We've got much better ventilation systems than we used to. We've got much better fly control than we used to. The cows are far more comfortable laying in their stalls, whether it be sand bedding or biosolid bedding. Basically, we've just learned to keep cows a lot more comfortable than they used to be, protecting them from the hot sun, protecting them from the bitter cold, and giving them a place to rest and metabolically make more milk while the rest of their body is able to rest. So this is nothing new to dairy people, but is surprising sometimes to people that come and visit a large dairy to see how comfortable the cows are. Also, much better balanced rations. We know a lot more about many areas of dairy science, and nutrition is certainly among those. Now, we just learned what cows need to make milk. We've learned what cows will be harmed by in trying to make milk, and we're doing a better job of putting the rations together for our cows. Nothing surprising here. Typically on the farms, we'll have PhD level nutritionists coming on the farm every 2 weeks or every month, testing the feed, balancing the ration, understanding the science of what dairy cows need. So we're just doing a much better job of putting the right ingredients in front of the cows to take care of their health and make production. So once again, nothing unusual, nothing sinister, simply keeping our cows more comfortable and feeding them better to be productive. The other thing we've done is we've got business models now that take advantage of new technologies and ways to keep cows comfortable. So we can put cows in larger facilities like we see here, longer freestall barns, open ventilation systems, stored feed, stored to prevent any mold or spoilage, milking parlors that are very efficient so the cows can come in, get milked, and go back and rest and lay down. So basically, we've just found ways to put systems together that work better for cows. And if you look here, this is Dairy Dreams in Kewaunee County, and you can see that a large number of small farms in the background are typical of the history that we've had, many small farms here in the past, but just a change coming throughout the area. Also, if you look, you can see how flat Kewaunee County is. And as I mentioned, that's an advantage for cows in the breezes. You can see the edge of Lake Michigan in the distance on the slide here, looking to the east. So many cooling breezes off the lake. And if we looked 180 degrees behind us, we'd see the Bay of Green Bay. So we found places to put cows and ways to keep cows comfortable and well fed, and also to manage the numbers of cows so that they're not impacted by having to be milked or moved out to pasture, things of that nature. There's something else that we should talk about, however, with Kewaunee County. Along with the great benefits for cows, the cool breezes, the great alfalfa that we can grow, the strong heritage of people to take care of the cows, we are located right smack over the area of Silurian dolomite around the upper Midwest. You can see the yellow area coming from the tip of Door County Peninsula down past Chicago into Illinois. You can see it also going around underneath Michigan in Indiana and Ohio, and you can see it wrap around to the east also. But for our sakes, Kewaunee County is entirely undermined by Silurian dolomite bedrock, and that is something that when I first moved here, I had no concept, but I had no idea what that meant for the community. If you look at the cliff off to the right side here, this is just where one of the highways are cut through to go into Door County, and you can see what that Silurian dolomite looks like. That's just basically cracks and fissures through the bedrock. So it's all hard stone, and there's cracks and fissures throughout the whole strata that you can see there, which means that anything that we do on the surface of the ground, anything we put on the surface of the ground can very quickly travel to the groundwater because it doesn't have to go through 100 feet of soil where it'll get ameliorated and broken down. It's just going through cracks and not being treated at all. And it's going to get to what's below the dolomite very quickly, and that would be the water table. So this is something to keep in mind, and also involves many of the other large producing areas of Wisconsin. When you look from the air, you can see what this looks like. This would be a typical alfalfa hayfield after a recent rain in a fairly dry period of time. So if you look at that groundwork there, each of the nice dark green areas would be a crack in the bedrock where it's easy for the roots to get down deeper into the soil and find water. All the more yellowish, lightly shaded areas in between would be the flat areas where the alfalfa is not able to put its roots as deep. So you can see here just a beautiful map of where the cracks are and where the alfalfa is able to thrive, but also where anything else that happens on the surface of the ground is easy to get down lower into the aquifer. Up close, one feature of Silurian dolomite areas are sinkholes. So you can see the person walking here is walking up to a sinkhole, and these areas are basically holes in the ground that have direct conduit right down to the groundwater itself, to the water table itself. So there's literally zero soil over this hole that we see here. It's just a straight shot right down through cracks into the aquifer with no protection at all. You can see this is kind of in a non-farmed area, which is fortunate because we have to build setbacks around these areas now because they are so potentially impacted by contaminants. But you can see here there'd be no moderation happening to any nutrients that were put on that ground in the area of that sinkhole. And same thing here. You can see this is flat rock going right up to a sinkhole, which would be off the edge of a field. These areas need to be protected by setbacks, but sometimes they pop up very suddenly and spontaneously, and you might not have known that it was there before until a weather event causes water to move in a different direction. Suddenly you find a sinkhole you didn't know was there, or you purchase a field from somebody and have to find the sinkholes for yourself because the people who sold you the land weren't aware where they were. They might be the next generation of the previous farm family living somewhere out of state. So this is something that we have to watch for very closely in our area. We also are not strangers because of this to something called groundwater events. A groundwater event is just what it sounds like, is something goes down through the cracks of the bedrock, gets into the aquifer. It's a contaminant. It's a visual contaminant in this particular case. And very commonly that would be manure that was spread to the top of the soil, or a sewage system, a septic system for residents that got close enough to a crack in the bedrock, and some of that material was able to seep down also. So these are, it's kind of a euphemism to call them groundwater events. They're basically sewage events that get into people's groundwater. This case here was made the press. It actually made the press as far as New York City. And basically this was just occurred when there was groundwater recharge. Spring melt came, and there was sudden flushing of anything on the surface down into the groundwater, and it caused this event. These outbreaks can be associated with some very significant bacterial diseases like Campylobacter or E. coli, if that happened to be the bacteria on the surface. Once again, whatever the source of that bacteria, it could get to the groundwater. In this particular case, oftentimes we would defend ourselves by saying these are old wells that were impacted. This was a new well. This was 123 feet deep with 63 foot of casing in this case. And it was very surprising that this could happen with a well like that. It's not new in Kewaunee County either. When we look back in the local paper, they have a article, a little section called "What Was Going On in the Door County Peninsula 100 years ago, and 150 years ago, and 200 years ago." And about a year ago, I was looking through that section, and I saw there was a case where somebody named Theophile Dewey died from a outbreak of salmonella, and they said it was the worst outbreak in Kewaunee County in memory. And this was 150 years ago. So this is long before modern agriculture, but it was an example of the fact that any human activity on top of the ground, even back then, could potentially affect the drinking water. In his case, it was actually fatal. Another thing that has changed, however, is we were used to being farms were used to being surrounded by other farms, whether it be their brothers or sisters' farm or their parents' farm or grandparents. We were all kind of in this community together. And when these groundwater events would happen, and often they were in old farmhouses that had old wells, they turned the tap on in the spring, and the water would be running and discolored, or maybe even had odor to it. So they would simply not drink it. They would go to town and get some bottled water, and that's just what they'd done for their entire lives, and just was one of the natures of the beast, and especially in the northern part of Kewaunee County. That was one thing when everybody was farmers or were related to farmers or had cousins who were farmers, but entirely different when your neighbors now are people that might have moved in from Milwaukee or from Chicago because they wanted to be out in the open air. They liked the proximity to the bay and Door County. So these are people that moved here with no experience in farming, no great attachment to farming, but were very, very concerned encounter a situation where they thought that one group, being the farmers, was negatively impacting them with their nice new house and their well and so on and so forth. So as these events occurred in the newer area, people petitioned the EPA to intervene and use its emergency powers to come up into Kewaunee County and fix the problem, as they said. And basically their idea was to chase away the farmers that were causing the problem in their minds. So this is the situation we confronted about 15 years ago. So what happened? How did we go from this area of farming community, farmers appreciating farmers, farmers or non-farmers being at least relations with people still farming, or at least having connections with it. They might have worked at the feed mill or at the cheese plant, at the agronomy store. Just they have connections with agriculture because that's what most of the business was. So what happened? How did we go from that fairly happy, sympathetic situation to the new confrontation that we were running into? What happened is agriculture changed. And if you ask most people in agriculture, it changed for the better and became more efficient. But that's one perspective. The fact of the matter is, though, that agriculture changed from what many people outside agriculture thought that it was or would always be. So the first wave that we had here of farmers in Kewaunee County, as I mentioned, were people coming in from Germany and Belgium, and they built relatively small farms. And basically, the number of cows they had were the number of cows that their family could take care of. So if they were milking by hand and they had 5 kids, they might have 10 or 15 or 20 cows maximum, because that's what that number of people could handle, and that dictated herd size. Those people, as a rule, the early immigrants and smaller farmers, when I got into Kewaunee County back in 1983, were generally quite good cow people. They knew their cows. They could tell you not only who a particular cow was, but who its mother was and who its granddam was, looking in the past. If something didn't look right about the cow, if she wasn't acting the way she normally acted, they would know, and they would call you and just say that she's acting funny, so you could examine her. But they knew their cows, they cared for their cows, and they were stewards of the land that they used to feed the cows. So this was a typical farm early on in Kewaunee County. There was a second wave then that came through our area of modernization, expansion, improvement, if you will, for dairy cows with the efficiencies. And that became farmers that were not necessarily focused on just taking care of their cows and could handle 2 cows per person. They were people that were comfortable with machinery. So they were able to use tower silos, harvester silos. They would have some alley scrapers or skid steers to move the manure. They have a milking parlor where the cows would walk in to get milked, allow them to do that as maybe a 2-hour part of their day, twice a day, and then they could get on with the field work. And they were able to maintain those larger numbers of cows because they were good with the machinery and comfortable with the machinery to put the feed together for all those cows. So we had the second wave of people that were good with machinery, and that allowed them to care for their cows in a different and a little more hands-off manner. So this wave was basically constrained only by the fact that, for the most part, when I'd ask these people if they planned on expanding to their 200 cows, they say, no, we have just as many cows as we can handle without having to hire any help. So it seemed like the limitation for that second wave these were people that were good with cows and good with machinery, but they didn't necessarily want to have a lot of people around to manage and to deal with the human factor. So basically, they got as big as they could without hiring people. The next wave came along about 20 years ago. This is the third wave, and this would be dairies that were comfortable with people. In fact, they needed people to do their different tasks on the dairy, and were comfortable managing those people and dealing with the fact that sometimes people wouldn't come to work when they needed to, or weren't motivated enough, or didn't understand their skills, but were comfortable working with the people, and they kind of enjoyed working with people. that allowed this next phase of the dairy industry, the wave of the dairy industry of people that were comfortable managing other people are generally where the larger firms started to come from about 20 years ago. This was a comfortable change for some people, but not many other people at the time. So it was kind of a new wave coming through, and third wave in the dairy world. So when we think about modernization like that, as dairymen and women, we look at that and we think, well, this is the natural progress, natural evolution. It's not right or wrong. It made sense for the reasons that we all understand, and we understood that cows were living a pretty good life as these changes were occurring. That wasn't necessarily shared by the people that don't farm, the 99% of the people that don't farm in this country. So if you look here, this is the leading car. That was the leading car back in 1974, most highly sold vehicle in the automotive industry in '74, and its miles per gallon was about 14 miles to the gallon of gas. By 2010, about 40 years later, the average miles per gallon on a car was 32.5. I would think there'd be nobody in the world who would argue that that was not an improvement and a good thing, that we more than doubled the mileage the cars get from a gallon of gas. There are all kinds of other improvements in those 2010 cars, besides fuel efficiency, which was more over 100% improved. Safety features, seat belts, airbags, lots of things to improve the cars where nobody would really question that a 2010 car was not better and more advanced than a 1974 car. So that was generally what we recognized as a modern miracle. How did technology come along that made the auto industry so much better, to provide so much better product to us? It just made sense to people because we all had cars. Thing is, with agriculture, we don't all have cows. Everybody has cars and likes a more modern car, but with agriculture, there have been fewer and fewer of us, fewer and fewer cows, and more milk regardless. So as you see in 1940, from this graph here, there were 26 million cows in the United States. So this is right before we went into World War II, about 26 million cows. And that dairy industry in 1940 nationwide produced 1.2 billion pounds of milk. So a lot of milk, a whole lot of cows. If now we go to 2008, a lot fewer cows. Instead of having the 26 million cows, we're down to 9 million cows. And that was 2008. If we look now at 2022, it's like 9.2. It's almost not changed from back in 2008. So we had about 9 billion cows, less than half of what we had in 1940, but we produced 1.9 billion pounds of milk. So we produced almost twice as much milk with a little less than half as many cows. And from a dairy's point of view, that's tremendously exciting, tremendously successful, and exactly what we need to do as dairy producers to remain viable, welcome, and in our communities. So what happened? We looked at the car improvements over those years, and everybody agrees that that was just perfect, just what they needed to have happen. And yet we look at the dairy industry, and we find ourselves surrounded by protesters. We see people writing letters to the editor in the paper. We have neighbors that are very dissatisfied with what we're doing, very disgruntled with what we're doing. We have regulators that are coming in, the EPA or whoever, coming in to address a problem that they perceive. So what happened to us? Why aren't we treated like the automobile industry and recognized and celebrated for these improvements and changes that we've made? And I think a big part of this is that we got so efficient that only 1% of us are left farming nowadays. And we've lost our touch to some degree with the 99%. Back when we had our farms surrounded by our cousins' farms, surrounded by our best friends from high school's farms, we didn't have these kinds of discussions. But now as we start seeing agriculture performed efficiently and well by a tiny fraction of our population, we find that we have less and less people around us that just inherently are glad we're doing what we're doing and appreciate that we must be doing the best way possible and have no questions. Things have changed now because society and the dairy industry have changed. So what do we do with this disenfranchisement that we have from the 99%? Well, traditionally in the dairy industry, when we had too much pressure in one place, we would move to another place. If things got tight around Chicago, we'd move a little bit up north into Wisconsin where there weren't as many people. And the stockyards went away in Chicago, and we ended up having agriculture a little further away. As we get pressure in the Midwest, we started going out more to the plain states and trying to find places where we'll be welcome and are free to grow. And that's a perfectly logical strategy, but we can only go so many places. And if we keep going one place after another and leaving other places, we're going to run out of room. We're not going to be able to make the food necessary, the high quality protein necessary for the country and the world. So moving to more suitable spots, it makes logical sense, but it's probably not a full answer. You kind of end up in a situation like this with the Titanic. So you'll have people in areas with under a lot of pressure against agriculture. They're down in the icy water, in the freezing water part of the ship already. And there might be people on the stern of the boat that are still playing music with the band, and they're fine so far. But basically, we have to right the ship. We have to find a way to re-engage with the 99%, with the non-ag community, because we can't just keep going away from them and hoping to be left alone. We need to change the way we talk with them and interact with them. And that's what I'd like to talk to you about now. So how do we earn back the trust and confidence of the 99%? Well, we found as producers in Kewaunee and Door County that we'd gotten together for a meeting and talked about the situation that we were in and what we needed to do about it. And we talked about starting a group, a farmer group, to start addressing these issues. And one of the producers in our group stood up and said, if we do this, are we willing to acknowledge that we are part of the problem with water contamination in Kewaunee County? That was a really fundamental, seminal question that he asked, as simple as it sounds. And conversation just stopped. Everybody had to stop and think about the impact of what he was asking and what it meant to us, because we were in defensive mode at that time. It's not our fault kind of thing. And we were able to come together because we recognized that it was crucial for us to say, yes, we're the largest users of land in Kewaunee County, Door County. So it makes sense that we are significant contributors to what happens under the ground. It doesn't mean that we're being careless. It doesn't mean that we don't care. It doesn't mean that we're being deliberately destructive. It just means that we are contributors to the problems. So therefore, we need to be contributors and drivers to solutions and say, yeah, we acknowledge that we're part of the problem, but here's what we're going to do to fix it. And that conversation was very important to start being able to have. It's okay to admit at that time, and even now, that we don't have all the answers, but it was not okay to stop trying to find the answers. So we put together a group called Peninsula Pride Farms with the subtitle of A Secure Future for Farms and for Our Neighbors. We're in this together. We wanted to find ways to protect our neighbors, protect our own farms and the groundwater for our own animals, and work together in a constructive manner, farmer with farmer. So if you see here, this is now the map of Kewaunee and Southern Door County, Kewaunee with the yellow boundary and Southern Door County with the pink boundary above. And I put this on here to show a critical thing for people to understand. Kewaunee County, as I mentioned, is second leading county in the eastern United States per cows per square mile. So there's a whole lot of cows jammed into that Luxembourg area, the Kewaunee County area on the map here. Door County, immediately adjacent, is also a farming community, but Door County represents the most popular and well-visited tourist area in the upper Midwest. So we've got this juxtaposition of a whole lot of cows in Kewaunee County and a whole lot of tourists in Door County. And that creates some interesting tension and challenges. It also creates some good opportunities for good discussions, good conversations, opening ourselves up to those people that are coming up to visit the peninsula and showing them what dairies are. The Kewaunee County Breakfast on the Farm, for example, which is not unique to Kewaunee County, many counties have that, is a huge event. And we tap into that, the Door County tourism side, and attract many of those tourists down for Father's Day on Breakfast on the Farm, where we have a chance to get them on the farm and do some touring, showing them what's going on the farm, and just reaching out to that community. So sometimes it's been a struggle having so much tourism close by, but it's also created an opportunity to have some very good conversations. So we've started a farmer-led, not-for-profit organization, and our group, Peninsula Pride Farms, includes Kewaunee and Southern Door. Our group is made up particularly of farmers, but also of other surrounding businesses and agencies, all focused on improving surface and groundwater quality. So it's a farmer-led group with support from the non-farming community. Our members vary in size, which is a little bit unusual in modern agriculture. There's sometimes some stratification by size. We started out with 46 dairy and crop farmers. The smallest farm was 60 cows. The largest was 6,000 cows. And we all came into this as if we had things to learn from each other. So we'll do field days regularly. And it could be on one of our smaller members' farms where they're trying some particular activity that was of interest, or on a large farm that they might have some new technology that they're working with. But it's a chance to get everybody together to see what's going on. So we don't all have to plow the same ground or make the same mistakes. We can learn from each other. So at the beginning, we were about 50% of the area were represented by our farms in Kewaunee and Southern Door, and about 50% of the tillable acres were included in Peninsula Pride Farms. Since that time, we've now gotten closer to 75% of cows and 75% of the agricultural land is represented by belonging to Peninsula Pride Farms. What we ask of our members is that they must show commitment to being stewards of the land and improving environmental quality. That means that they need to have a focus on continuous improvement in farming practices. It doesn't mean that they have to be the best farmer in the county. It doesn't mean that they have to be perfect in their practices. It means that they have to be committed to continuous improvement. They could be a farm that struggled for years with some difficult to control issues, but are now looking at new ways of farming the ground, protecting groundwater, doing something different because they feel that what they've been doing up to now could be improved. So what we're looking for in our members is not perfection, but a commitment to continuous improvement in their farming practices. We also need to have independent analysis done of nutrient management plans. Sometimes that gives a fresh perspective of the plan. We can sometimes find some opportunities there that weren't otherwise visible. We thought that it was very important in our group for all members to pay dues. We wanted people to have skin in the game. So we came up with a dues and donation combination program. The dues are two tiers, lower price for farms up to 200 cows, a larger price for farms above 200 cows, in the interest of fairness, trying to spread the cost a little more evenly. We were also able to get some grants to help with some matching grants for us to start this, because it took some money to get organized, get materials together, to put some meetings together. So we were able to get grants originally from DATCAP and still are being supported by them. They're very, very important promoters of farm-related watershed improvements, and also from private organizations. The Nature Conservancy, for example, which in many areas is seen as being a opponent of agriculture, is one of our largest donors. The Nature Conservancy loves what we're doing. They love that we're getting measurements and collecting data from what we're doing and sharing it with each other. and that we're being creative with our practices. So they've been great supporters in us in the fact that we're trying to improve the impact of farming on the surrounding land, whether it be large or small farms. One thing that we needed to do was to decide what our goals were. We talked a lot about the groundwater issues with the fractured dolomite aquifer, but as you noticed on the map that I showed earlier, we've got Lake Michigan shoreline along the entire eastern side of Kewaunee County and the Bay of Green Bay on part of the northwest corner of Kewaunee County. So what we needed to do is not only protect the groundwater, the water getting into the aquifer, we had to worry about phosphorus runoff and contaminants in the surface water, whether they're causing phosphorus blooms in the shore of Lake Michigan, or if they're causing algae blooms in the shoreline that we've got up in Door County, in the Bay of Green Bay. We needed to worry about the groundwater and the surface water both. So we've taken a focus on both, not just focusing on one or the other. Then what we would do is we would evaluate members' farms to craft individual plans for continuous improvement. So we'd have professionals that were helping us look at the plans and find areas where we've got great practices on this 20% of our land. We can make improved practices here and come up with plans for, we had 20% protection last year, we've got 40% this year, we're shooting for 60% next year. So just evaluate our plans, what we're doing, how we could do it differently, and how we could improve. And we've got the professionals supporting our group that are able to help us with that. We also wanted to assist farmers in meeting voluntary standards that were recommended by the State Work Group for sensitive areas, because with the shallow bedrock that we have, we're entirely considered a sensitive area in Wisconsin. So as far as protecting the lakes and streams, the focus was on the surface water for those areas. We worked on improving soil health. Many of you know Jamie Patton, professor in the UW system. She has been a tremendous supporter of our organization. We've had her speak at many of our annual events and field days. She's never happier than when she's sitting in a soil pit like this, looking at worms and showing people how different farming practices have worked. So here on the ground draining into the surrounding waters, we've worked on improving soil health, reducing phosphorus loss, putting practices in place that not only can grow the crops, but can protect the surface water from phosphorus runoff. As far as safe drinking water, also critical in our area. Once again, the very shallow bedrock. In this case, we put a field day together to show producers how to measure the depth of bedrock in their fields. Because in this particular field, we'd find some areas with less than a foot down to bedrock. And we were putting a demonstration together for how those areas can be found and what farming practices can be used in that shallower area to protect the groundwater from the pathogens. So a two-pronged approach of surface water and groundwater, but once again, with the farmers taking the lead and identifying their practices and working with professionals to find solutions where you can make improvements and not only have improved crop growth, but improved protection from the groundwater to the surface water. We've started, as you can see in the bottom of the list, there's something called conservation conversations. And these are extremely popular. We put these on one evening a month, every month for the growing season, basically starting in March and finishing in November. And they'll be in the evening, right after supper from about 7 to 8:30. And we just go out to a field where we're featuring something that's being done. It could be a new technology for a bark bed for phosphorus filtration from a field. It could be different cropping technique, tillage technique. Recently we did one for a farmer who did some great work on protecting grassy waterways through his farm. But it's short meetings on a farm for 1 to 1.5 hours, 1 month or 1 week out of the month. And the idea is just to get people out, let them see something, let them talk to the person who did the practice, find out what they liked, find out what they didn't like. Maybe it didn't work very well, but that's something good for people to hear also. And just a chance to quickly get in, see something, and get back home. These are very well attended. So idea was that we would empower farmers with knowledge and the training and shared experience so we don't all have to make the same mistake. 2 or 3 people can try something and say it worked a lot better when we did it this way, and that can direct everybody else to pick up where that dropped off. Not everybody has to be their own entire research department. We can try something confident that our neighbors and co-members are doing something different, but we're going to get together, we're going to talk about it for the good or the bad, with the focus being that these practices not only have to sustain our farms, but they need to sustain the community of non-farmers around us. And by doing that, we found that those people really do want us here. But first of all, they needed to know that we cared. They didn't necessarily need to know what we did. They really needed to know why we did it and if we cared or not. And once we were able to back up from the defensive position and take on the progressive side of this is what we're trying to learn, this is what didn't work very well, this is what we're doing differently. Non-farmers are on board with what we're doing. The concerns that we've heard, the negative criticism has for the most part gone away simply because people didn't think we really cared. We might write a letter to the editor in the old days saying, no, we're great people, but that never seemed to help. People wanted to see us out on the farms, talking to our neighbors, talking to other farmers, sharing ideas and admitting that we didn't have all the answers and admitting that we agreed that we were part of the problem and we needed to be part of the solution. By taking that position strongly and openly and not being defensive about it, we've received an entirely different kind of welcome in the community, and we want to keep up the momentum of that. So our idea was that the Door County Peninsula could have both safe, clean water and a thriving agricultural community. And we've been successful so far in working towards that, but it's definitely a work in progress. We can't let our guard down. We can't take our foot off the pedal for communication, openness, and new practices that are making a difference with less odor, less water contamination, less congested roads. This is an ongoing effort, and we appreciate the positive reception we've had, but we know that that's all going to go away if we don't keep the forward momentum going ourselves. So with that, we'd like to finish up talking about the 4th wave. We had the first 3 waves of the dairy industry here, but now I think there's a 4th wave, and that's not necessarily larger farmers or different technology. It's basically farmers who can engage with the non-farming public on issues such as their ethics and responsibilities. These weren't things that were people were really interested in talking about before. Those are kind of personal issues. But if we can openly engage with people as to why we do things, why we think it's the right thing to do, and how important that is to us, we can get much farther in relationships with the non-farming public. In the 4th wave, farmers have to be willing to continuously look at their actions as perceived by others and change when they need to. And lastly, farmers will need to seek out the perspective of newcomers to agriculture before they become indoctrinated. How often do any of us have interns, student interns, or people from the city who come out to work on the farm for one summer, and the first thing they'll tell us is, boy, that looks kind of odd or kind of unsettling, or I'm not really sure I like the way that it looks the way you're doing that over there, whether it be dehorning calves or tilling a field. And we have to, instead of telling them, no, it's all fine, it's great, we have to listen to why they thought that and why it struck them that way and what we can do to not perceived in that manner. So part of this is we have to be listeners to the non-farmers and not just be talking over them. So that concludes my comments for today. I always enjoy talking about this, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if people have questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Niles. Before we dive into the questions, as you can all see on your screen, we would just like to invite you to our next VES-Artex Academy webinar. It'll be on Friday, November 11th Dr. Aaron Cortes of the University of Minnesota is going to be talking about navigating science and communications aspect of sustainable dairies. So another exciting presentation as we're focusing on sustainability this quarter. All right, well, so the first question we have Dr. Niles is, what is the key thing about your organization that often surprises people?
I think what surprises people is we like to come across as confident people. So it's a little bit surprising to people to talk about, I don't have all the answers. I'm trying to figure this out because I know I can do this better. What I tried there last year didn't work the way I wanted it to, so I'm going to try this over here. I think we all like to come across as competent and confident and having the answers, but that's not the way real life is. People know that nobody knows everything. So by being open and saying, boy, I see that I created this problem for you by creating an odor issue or something. Let me tackle this differently next year. Here's what I plan on doing. People are surprised by that approach, to be open.
And what kind of support does Peninsula Pride Farms receive?
Well, it's multi-pronged, and we're very lucky. The DATCAP program to support farmer-led groups was put in place about 10 years ago, and that's a great program. That's trying to support farmers do what they can do, only better, as opposed to just put rules and regulations together and saying, okay, you can only spread in this type of soil this often, and here's the cropping practices you need to use, and you get in trouble if you don't do it our way. And instead, they say, well, let's help you figure different ways out. And sometimes that gives you the latitude to try things that you couldn't have tried before, or the financial resources to try a piece of equipment or something that you wouldn't have been able to do before. So support comes from DATCAP, Nature Conservancy, and also from members' dues. I think the members' dues is crucial, so people know that you have some skin in the game.
So how would you recommend other areas with large dairy farm populations start to make sustainability improvements and continue to share their dairies initiatives?
Well, I think one thing to do is find out what support you're going to get from the non-farm community. Is the county ag department, for example, are they interested in supporting something like this, because they have some time and resources they can devote. Of the other ag businesses in the area, banks or feed mills, agronomists, what do they have that they can offer to help? And is there truly a need or desire on the producer and themselves to get some help working together and letting the guard down a little bit? Can you find enough for producers that are willing to share what they're doing and discuss the good and the bad of it? So are you willing to be open, I think is one of the crucial things.
Absolutely. Shifting gears a little bit, this question is asking more on your opinion. What do you think about automatic milking systems for bigger herds?
I think they're intriguing. I think they've got a lot of potential. It's kind of one of those other wave things. You know, if the third wave are people that are good with people, maybe we're getting back into a people that are more comfortable with more advanced robotic technologies. I think they surely have a place. And like with anything else, I'll be really anxious to see what other people are doing so I can impact what I'm doing. So it's similar to the approach we're taking with sustainability, but in this case, it's dairy management and also learning from each other.
Perfect. Well, that is the end of the questions that we have. So thank you again, Dr. Niles, for your time. And thank you to everyone in the audience who took time out of their Friday to join us. We hope that you have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.